There is a dark, unspoken reality in the world of family betrayal. We like to believe that a mother's instinct is to protect her children at all costs, to shield them from the cold, harsh realities of life. But every now and then, a case comes along that completely shatters that illusion. A case where a parent looks at their own child and doesn't see a life to nurture. They see a clean slate, a weapon, a financial human shield. Imagine spending 8 long years of your childhood waiting for your mother to be released from a state penitentiary. You dream of the day she steps back into your life to finally be the parent you never had. But the moment she walks through those prison gates, she doesn't offer an apology. Instead, she sneaks into a family home, steals her 17-year-old son's birth certificate, and secretly forges his name on a luxury apartment lease he knows absolutely nothing about. But that was only the beginning of the nightmare. She lived the high life on a teenager's identity, stopped paying the rent, and in a fit of pure malice, completely vandalized the property before fleeing into the night. Years later, when that boy tries to start his adult life, he discovers a crushing $10,000 collection debt hovering over his head, destroying his credit before he can buy his first car. In this incredible episode of Karmic Edge, this entitlement is brought directly into the light of a no-nonsense courtroom. Watch as the mother stands before the bench completely unbothered, using stress to justify ruining her own son's future, only for Judge Judy to launch a devastating, rapid-fire verbal takedown that strips away her armor and delivers the ultimate jaw-dropping hit of instant karma. Lock your doors and stay tuned, because today, a mother's greediest trap is about to spring right back on her. Welcome back to Karmic Edge, where the entitled are stripped of their armor and justice is delivered with a sledgehammer. To fully comprehend the jaw-dropping malice of this situation, we have to look back at the decade of silence that preceded it. Our story unfolds in a quiet suburb where a young boy named Sherelle Williams and his older brother Xavier were forced to navigate a childhood overshadowed by absolute instability. Sandra Williams was a woman who lived by a dangerous philosophy, one that prioritized shortcuts, quick money, and a complete disregard for the consequences of her actions. When Sherelle was just 9 years old, a critical age where a boy desperately needs a mother's guidance, structure, and presence, the front doors of his world were kicked wide open by law enforcement. Sandra's past had caught up with her. She was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to a grueling 8 years in a state penitentiary for high-level financial fraud and forgery.
Suddenly, 2 young boys were left entirely stranded in the wake of their mother's greed. Sandra didn't leave behind a savings account, an inheritance, or a support network. She left behind legal chaos and a broken home. But where a broken mother failed, an extraordinary aunt stepped into the breach. Vanessa, Sandra's sister, was working a modest, low-paying job, barely managing to keep her own head above water. Yet, the moment she saw her nephews facing the cold, systemic gears of the foster care system, she didn't hesitate. She opened her doors and took them in. For nearly 10 long years, Aunt Vanessa did the impossible. She shielded those boys from the harshness of their reality. She taught them the value of an honest day's work, ensuring Xavier finished his education, and standing by Sherelle as he transformed his childhood trauma into absolute fuel for his future. Sherelle refused to let his mother's criminal record define his destiny. He spent his teenage years studying late into the night, eventually securing admission into a highly specialized technical undergraduate program at Carrington College. There, he mastered the complex craft of building custom industrial control panels for massive automotive facilities and commercial car washes. He was a model citizen. He had a pristine record, 0 background red flags, and a flawless, untouched credit history.
He was the absolute pride of his aunt and brother. But miles away, behind the heavy concrete walls of the state prison, Sandra's release date was creeping closer, and she wasn't planning a humble, quiet return to society. She was looking for her next mark. In July of 2021, the iron gates of the correctional facility finally swung open, and Sandra Williams tasted freedom for the first time in a decade. The state, recognizing her high risk for reoffending, placed her into a strictly monitored halfway house. Under the terms of her release, she was required to secure immediate employment, save her wages, and demonstrate that she could live an honest life. But Sandra had a taste for luxury before her arrest, and the grinding, slow-paced reality of minimum wage work disgusted her. She didn't want to rebuild her life from scratch. She wanted to live like she had never left. Within months, she scouted out a gorgeous, high-end, upscale apartment complex managed by a strict corporate real estate firm. The unit was immaculate, boasting top-tier amenities and a premium price tag. Sandra filled out the application with a confident, entitled smile. But 24 hours later, the corporate vetting system flagged her file. An 8-year gap in employment, a fresh release from a state prison cell, and a credit profile buried under a mountain of unresolved pre-prison judgments. The verdict was instant: rejected, denied, flagged. A normal person would accept this as the direct consequence of their own life choices. They would find a humble room to rent, work hard, and slowly restore their reputation. But Sandra didn't see consequences. She saw obstacles. And to bypass this obstacle, she decided to target the one person who loved her enough to trust her blindly, her youngest son, Sherelle. At this time, Sherelle was just turning 17 years old. He was a minor, still living under the protective roof of his aunt. He was young, naive, and completely desperate to build a relationship with the mother he hadn't seen since he was a small child. Sandra recognized this vulnerability, and she chose to weaponize it. One evening, under the false pretense of wanting to gather family documents and organize records, Sandra visited her sister Vanessa's home. While the family was distracted in the kitchen, Sandra quietly slid into the back room and opened Vanessa's private filing cabinets. She dug through the papers until she found exactly what she was looking for: Sherelle's social security card, his state identification numbers, and his birth certificate. She went back to her computer and opened a brand new lease application with the corporate luxury complex. But this time, she didn't input her own name. She typed in Sherelle Williams. She completely fabricated his employment details, forged his income parameters, and linked the profile to a burner email account and her own cell phone number. When the digital signing portal generated the legally binding multi-thousand-dollar contract, Sandra didn't flinch. She forged her 17-year-old son's signature on the document. Because Sherelle was a minor with a completely spotless legal background, the automated system approved the application within seconds. Sandra packed her bags and moved into her new luxury home, leaving her son completely vulnerable to a corporate predator. For 11 months, Sandra lived a life of luxury she had not earned, completely financed by the stolen identity of her own teenager. She didn't care that her son was working grueling hours at college, pouring sweat into learning a trade to build an honest life. She was comfortable, and that was all that mattered. But by the 12th month, the financial house of cards utterly collapsed. The money ran out. Sandra stopped paying the rent entirely. She ignored the warning letters from the property attorneys. She ignored the formal eviction notices that were all legally addressed to Sherelle Williams. When the real estate firm finally secured a formal court order to evict her, Sandra realized her free ride had reached its bitter end. But instead of packing her belongings and leaving with a shred of dignity, the latent rage and criminal entitlement inside her boiled over. She decided that if she couldn't have the apartment, she would ensure no one else could either.
In an appalling display of pure malice, Sandra launched a calculated vandalism campaign against the property. She grabbed heavy objects and smashed massive holes directly through the drywall of every room. She shattered the porcelain fixtures in the bathrooms, tore up sections of the premium flooring, and left piles of rotting garbage and filth exposed to the elements. It wasn't just a messy departure. It was a deliberate, vengeful assault against a landlord she didn't like. When she vanished into the night, the corporate management team conducted a formal walkthrough. The initial unpaid rent was $3,805, but when they added up the extensive structural property damage, the legal fees, the late penalties, and a massive corporate collection surcharge exceeding $2,800, the final judgment balance skyrocketed to a staggering $9,931.60. And because Sandra had forged the paperwork, that massive judgment was officially filed against the clean name of Sherelle Williams. For the next few years, this financial time bomb ticked silently in the background of Sherelle's life. He turned 21. He graduated his technical program with honors. He landed an elite job building custom control panels for major industrial facilities. He was finally ready to step into independent adulthood. He walked into a local credit union, proud, confident, and ready to apply for a loan to buy a reliable vehicle for his work. But as the loan officer pulled up his credit profile, the room went completely cold. The officer looked at him with an expression of shock and profound pity. Sherelle's credit score was utterly decimated. There, stamped in black and white, was a default judicial judgment for nearly $10,000, labeling him a delinquent tenant, a financial ghost, and a property vandal. Sherelle was completely devastated. He had never signed a lease. He had never spent a single night in that apartment complex. When he confronted his mother, expecting tears or an apology, she simply rolled her eyes, shrugged her shoulders, and told him he was being ungrateful for the privilege of helping his mother. Realizing that his own mother was entirely willing to sacrifice his entire life to protect her comfort, Sherelle knew he had to fight back. He filed a formal affidavit of identity theft and forgery, taking his own mother to civil court. And the judge assigned to dismantle this family nightmare, the most legendary zero-tolerance force in judicial history, Judge Judy Sheindlin. The atmosphere inside the courtroom was thick with tension as all parties took their place at the tables. On one side stood Sherelle Williams, accompanied by his older brother, Xavier. Sherelle looked exhausted, his shoulders heavy with the painful reality of having to sue his own mother to save his future. On the other side stood Sandra, dressed casually, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, radiating an aura of complete, unbothered arrogance. She didn't look like a mother facing her children. She looked like a scam artist waiting for a minor inconvenience to pass. From the second Judge Judy stepped on the bench, her eyes locked directly onto the paperwork. She didn't waste a single second with pleasantries. She opened the record by looking at Sherelle, asking him to confirm the terrifying details of the lawsuit. With a steady but emotionally strained voice, Sherelle laid out the facts. He explained how he discovered the $10,000 collection debt, how the lease was executed when he was a 17-year-old minor, and how he was actually bouncing between his brother's apartment and his Aunt Vanessa's home during the entire duration of the tenancy. Judge Judy listened intently, her face hardening with every word. Then she turned her gaze slowly toward the defense table, focusing on Sandra like a hawk mapping out its target. Judge Judy demanded to know how an unemployed woman fresh out of an 8-year prison sentence could possibly justify putting a luxury lease in the name of a child.
Sandra didn't even flinch. She leaned back against her table, waved her hand dismissively, and delivered an excuse that made the entire gallery gasp. She boldly claimed that because she had spent 8 years in a cell, she was under an immense amount of stress upon her release. She argued that because she had raised her children prior to her arrest, her son owed her her help, and that he willingly agreed to let her use his credit. But Judge Judy was 10 steps ahead of her. With a sudden slam of her hand against the judicial bench, she cut her off entirely. Judge Judy pointed out the glaring mathematical flaw in her lie. If Sandra went to prison when Sherelle was 9 years old and didn't get out until he was 17, she hadn't raised him his entire childhood, while her sister Vanessa did the heavy lifting. Judge Judy looked Sandra dead in the eye and told her she was a fraud who didn't see a son. She saw a clean Social Security number that hadn't been ruined by the system yet. As the pressure mounted, Sandra's smug expression began to fracture. She began to scramble, changing her story right there on the record. She admitted that she was the one who had the electronic documents sent to her tablet, and she casually confessed that because she wasn't good with technology, she might have used Sherelle's personal birth certificate and identification numbers to bypass the landlord's credit check. But she doubled down on her entitlement, looking directly at the judge and stating that as a mother, she had a right to use her family's information when she was going through a hard time. Judge Judy's response was absolute fire. She leaned over the bench, her voice booming through the microphone, declaring that a child is not a financial shield. She stated that the law protects minors from predatory strangers, but it exists heavily to protect them from predatory parents who try to ruin their children's futures to cover up their own failures. The focus then shifted to the utter destruction of the property. Judge Judy read through the corporate maintenance logs, listing the broken walls, smashed bathroom porcelain, and intentional vandalism. When she demanded an explanation for the destruction, Sandra shrugged her shoulders again, stating that she and the property management company simply didn't get along and that she became emotional during the eviction. Xavier, the older brother, couldn't stay silent any longer. Stepping up to the microphone, he testified to the court that his younger brother Sherelle was an honorable, upstanding man who had never vandalized a thing in his life. He looked at his mother with utter disappointment, stating that the entire family was completely heartbroken by her casual cruelty. Sandra merely rolled her eyes at her eldest son, muttering under her breath that they were all ungrateful. Judge Judy had heard more than enough. The case was transparent, the evidence was ironclad, and the moral outrage was absolute. Turning away from the defendant with complete disgust, she focused her full attention on Sherelle. Her tone shifted from fierce anger to deep maternal respect. She told the young man that he was an incredibly impressive individual, someone who had overcome the massive hurdle of an absent mother, worked his way through a specialized college, and built a real career with his own hands. She declared that this court would never allow an honest man's future to be mortgaged by a criminal's selfishness. With a final, thunderous strike of her gavel, Judge Judy delivered her ultimate decree. Judgment was formally entered for the plaintiff, Sherelle Williams, in the full amount of $9,931.60. But the court didn't just hand him a piece of paper, it fixed the problem permanently. Judge Judy ordered her law clerks to directly contact the collection agency's legal team. The court ordered that the funds from the judgment award be issued directly to the collection firm to satisfy the debt in full. Sherelle's credit history was ordered to be completely expunged of the eviction, the vandalism, and the debt. His name was cleared, his slate was wiped pristine, his future was given back to him. As for Sandra, Judge Judy left her with a chilling warning, reminding her that forging the signature of a minor to execute a fraudulent corporate contract is a state felony. She advised Sandra to look for a secondary night job because once the local district attorney reviewed the transcript of this trial, her freedom was going to be cut incredibly short all over again. Outside the courtroom, the cameras captured the final, tragic reality of Sandra Williams. She stood in the hallway, still completely blind to her actions, loudly complaining that her sister had turned her children against her and that her sons would one day regret being so ungrateful to the woman who gave them life. She walked out of the courthouse completely isolated, trapped in the bitter prison of her own endless greed. But for Sherelle, the dark cloud had finally vanished. With his credit score instantly restored to its perfect status, the corporate vultures stopped circling. Within 3 months of walking out of that courtroom, he successfully secured a prime-rate loan for a brand-new, reliable vehicle, moved into a beautiful apartment of his own, and continued to excel as a master industrial panel builder. He proved to the entire world that you do not have to let the toxic, criminal choices of your parents dictate the height of your destiny. Sandra Williams thought she could use her own flesh and blood as a financial shield against her failures, but she forgot the most fundamental law of the universe. When you try to bury an innocent person in the dirt, you only end up digging your own grave. Karma audited her books, found her completely bankrupt of morality, and collected every single cent she owed. Thank you for watching this extended deep dive on Karmic Edge. If you believe this mother got exactly what she deserved, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Should the state launch criminal forgery charges against her next? Let's talk about it. Until next time, keep your edge clean and let karma do the heavy lifting.